You're just not. Teams are not going to give up a wide open look 9 times out of 10. So that's the best shot you're going to get. And when they don't shoot that, it dooms the offense. And to me, I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head. Horford is showing a little bit of the signs of aging on the defensive end, but on offense, he's just not playing aggressively. And they just can't afford that with Simmons out there, because if Simmons and Horford don't shoot, teams can cheat off of two different guys to double Embiid or to help into the lane, and you just can't run an offense that way.
No, you can't. And do you think this is a good time to segue into our marquee matchups for the upcoming week? Just because if you look and see my
I
first
love it.
choice, do you think it's worthy? Do you still think it's worthy, regardless of Embiid's status?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is still a huge game. I mean, why don't I let you introduce this game?
So for our first marquee matchups now for games starting tomorrow, the 8th, all the way through the 13th, I have Thursday, January the 9th, Celtics at Sixers, which a rematch of opening night where the Sixers just manhandled Boston. And Embiid even said he was going to try and play in this game because of how much success they had against the Celtics on opening night. So hopefully Embiid plays. That'll make this game that much more exciting. But Celtics are playing well. We've already waxed poetic on the Sixers, so I think that's going to be a good first game.
Yeah, and I mean, the one thing that's going to be interesting is debatably the two best players in this game might not play. Kemba Walker has missed the last 3 games with the flu, and now Embiid's questionable. I think one of the things that's going to be really interesting to watch, though, Jason, is have you noticed how differently the Sixers play when Embiid is off the floor? It's
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 night and day.
it's unbelievable. I mean, Simmons wants to play up and down basketball, and he just wants to run every time they get a rebound. And I've watched a few games, Jason, where he actually gets angry at his teammates because they throw it to someone else or they hold the ball too long. He kind of like puts his hands up and he gets kind of upset. As soon as that ball comes off the rim, he wants it up the court and he wants to run. And that is not Embiid's game. So it's always really interesting when we see these games without Embiid because it's almost like you're watching, as you said, a completely different team. It's night and day. So I think the Celtics game is going to be really interesting because if there's no Embiid, it's going to be an up and down game because the Celtics have no bigs really to speak of on their roster, and if there's no Embiid, Simmons is going to push the ball, and we're going to see a lot more of up tempo basketball, I think.
I think I'm going to skip my trip to Florida and just drive down to Philly and get tickets to this game because the way you just talked about these things just makes me want to go. But I'm going to go into number two. And this was a tough week because I think a lot of the contenders are playing weaker teams. But then I came across this one on Saturday, January the 11th, and that's Bucks at Trailblazers. And I know the Blazers have been struggling. Carmelo Anthony's there now. Damian Lillard's getting healthy. And the Bucks got smacked the other night by the San Antonio Spurs, a loss in which they called a lesson that they will learn. And Ben finally can breathe a sigh of relief that the Bucks have lost a game, and he can just say how bad they are offensively. No, I'm just kidding. But Bucks and Blazers, I think it's a good game. Budenholzer and company head west, take on the Blazers, one of the tougher places to play in the league. And I think that's a good way to cap off your Saturday night.
Yeah, and another great game on Sunday with the Clippers traveling to the Mile High City in Denver. We get to see two of the top teams in the West, and the Nuggets have been on fire. You mentioned how well Jokic has played. He is silencing everyone, Jason. I mean, he has been unbelievable. And I mean, we've talked about this a few weeks now, Jason, and it's so funny. If there's one team that should feel a little bit upset, I think it's the Nuggets, who are very quietly second in the West, have played really pretty well given that Jokic has not been the guy. There's been so much hand wringing about this team, and yet they sit at 25 and 11 in second place in the West. So that's going to be a great game. We get to see the Clippers travel there. And can I make an honorable mention fourth one, Jason, that I'm a little
By
bit
all
excited
means.
about? Yeah.
By all means, sir.
How about tomorrow, January 8th, the Denver Nuggets travel to Dallas to see a guy who could be the MVP, Luka Doncic, who I got to watch play the Bulls last night. That is going to be an incredible game. We talked about the Euros at the beginning of the show. I mean, Doncic versus Jokic is going to be an unbelievable matchup. And these are two teams that are both young, frisky teams who I think if you polled the league, they're two of the brighter futures of the teams in the West because of those two guys and their centerpieces. So I think that's going to be a great game as well.
No, it will be. And I feel like a bad person because we've been talking about the Mavericks in our marquee matchups almost every week since the season started. So I was trying to leave them out, especially when Porzingis has been in and out of games, but we found a way to sneak him in, man. I can't be mad at that.
Yeah, and speaking of guys who are out of places, there's a couple guys, Jason, who we might see on new teams in not too long. And let's start with the Motor City. We talked about the Mile High City. Now we're on to the Motor City, and Andre Drummond might be on the move. Only adding to the speculation, Jason, is news that Blake Griffin may go undergo season-ending knee surgery. So it feels like this Detroit team is kind of looking at the writing on the wall, seeing that they're 4 games out of the 8th spot. Orlando has passed your beloved Nets, which we'll get to in a second, and they just don't seem like they're going to be really competing for that 8th spot. And it feels like the Sixers team, this Pistons team might be kind of deciding to move on, Jason. I mean, what do you think, and are there any teams you could see Drummond going to?
So I know the speculations involving the Atlanta Hawks, and I think that would be a great fit alongside Trae Young and Collins if he's not included in the deal, although I think Trae Young would be the only untouchable. But I have to give Andre Drummond credit because he's still a very productive center and one of the better pure fives in the league. And he's gone on record saying that he wants to stay in Detroit. He's not a quitter. It's a team that drafted him. He thinks they could be good, which is all fine and dandy. But because the Pistons have drafted so poorly and made that fly-by-night trade for Blake Griffin, which they probably could have gotten him in free agency for nothing. We say this every time we bring up the Pistons. Remember a few shows ago when we did no one's talking about this team and we talked about the Pistons? I mean, no one's going to Detroit willingly, which is a problem. But yeah, that's why you have to give Drummond that much more credit because he wants to stay. He wants to tough it out. I think that's making him even more attractive to potential NBA teams. I just don't think that the Hawks are the answer right now because they're not ready to win just yet. I picked them to make the playoffs. I was dead wrong. They're the worst team in the Eastern Conference right now, and they're a couple of years away. So what I think is if the Clippers want to make another trade, then I think he should end up going to L.A. on a half-season rental and then seeing what happens in the offseason and whether or not he'll get a max deal. Because honestly, my prediction for Drummond is that he becomes the next DeMarcus Cousins where he signs one-year deals and tries to go on championship teams. As long as he stays healthy, I think he can do that. But no one's giving Andre Drummond a $100 million deal right now.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see. And I'm just not sure how much he impacts winning. And that's kind of the tough thing. You really have to wonder sometimes with Drummond. I mean, sure, he's going to eat you up on the boards, but he's just not a particularly useful offensive player. And he's not particularly great defensively. So he's having a better year this year, obviously, and he's having a career year in a lot of respects, but I think a lot of people are still dubious that he impacts winning. Speaking of a guy who could impact winning and who I think coming into the season we both thought was probably the most likely guy to get moved, just about 3 hours southeast of Detroit, there is some trouble in Cleveland, Jason. Kevin Love recently had an interesting possession where he kind of threw up his hands, got very upset with with his teammate, and had to come out in the media and apologize, say that he loves his teammate, and then today say that he was acting like a 13-year-old boy. I mean, what do you make of this situation, Jason? And is it time for Kevin Love to leave the Cavaliers?
Are we talking about Kevin Love or Joaquin Phoenix? Because I think he's seen the Joker too many times, and he's really letting it get to his head. No, I get it's frustrating. For a guy, that's what I call the LeBron James factor, because Kevin Love was traded for Andrew Wiggins. They win a championship, and then Kevin Love's the first one to re-up. I want to be in Cleveland for the long haul. Little does he know that LeBron and Kyrie had these master plans to get the hell out of there, leaving Kevin Love right back where he was at in Minnesota, being a stat stuffer on a bad team. So his contract's not that movable right now. I believe he's halfway through it. So I think the best resolution for Love, who's made a lot of money, he's got a ring, is just to get bought out and become a nice stretch four on a contender. I mean, he would look great in Portland. Slide Carmelo Anthony to the 3. You imagine a lineup of Dame, CJ, Melo, Love, and Whiteside could contend in the West this year. So I think the buyout route is ultimately the way to go because of all the drama. All that is irrelevant. His contracts are movable. At least Andre Drummond's is expiring. Love's is going to be that much harder to move. Don't you agree?
I don't know. The reason I'm not sure is I still like Love's game, and to be honest, I think one of the problems is the situation right now, Jason. I mean, if have you watched any of this Cavaliers team? I mean, it is ugly basketball. They started off well, but do you know who leads this team in assist to turnover ratio, Jason?
Joaquin Phoenix.
Good guess, but it is inveterate gunner Jordan Clarkson.
Well, he's
This
not
is
there anymore.
that's what I'm saying, man. I mean, when your leading assist to turnover guy is a gunner like Jordan Clarkson, and then he gets traded, this is where I think a lot of Love's frustration is coming. Is that when you look down the list from him, I mean, it's ugly. I mean, the next guys on the list are Chetty Osmond. I mean, Larry Nance Jr. I mean, the point guards or the alleged point guards for this team just don't distribute the ball at all. And when you watch that play, the reason that Love was getting frustrated was that his lead guard is trying to get into an isolation play instead of running the play that, Love felt that should be called. And that lack of ball movement, I think, is really bothering him because that's just his style of play is to move the ball more often. So it's really tough for me to figure this out because I just don't see with his contract, as you said, none of the teams that could use him are really in the championship picture. You look at a team like the Blazers, I mean, at this point, they would be crazy to make a trade for him when they're so out of the real contention picture. And so you really have to wonder, like, what team who's really in the championship picture is going to use him? The only team, Jason, that I could see, and I've heard little murmurs on this one, is the Boston Celtics, who desperately need a big man, Jason. I mean, what would you make of a trade, something like Gordon Hayward and maybe some pieces for a guy like Kevin Love?
I mean, I think that's possible because that was originally one of the Kevin Love destinations.
Yep.
Because that was right when the Celtics and Nets made that crazy deal, and the Celtics had all those picks before Brown and Tatum were even drafted. And when Kevin Love was on the block, the Celtics looked at as a potential landing spot. It was supposed to be him, Anthony Davis, and Kyrie Irving, and that would have been insane. But for the Celtics to grab another former star from Cleveland's title run just shows that, you know, Danny Ainge is following the Danny Ferry method. It must be the name Danny. No, I'm just kidding. But I think it would be a good fit. I just don't think Brad Stevens would give up on Gordon Hayward so easily, so I don't know if the pieces would work. That's why I think the buyout route's the way to go. But, it's tough.
Yeah, that's a lot of money to eat. I mean, I think it's going to be really interesting. We're going to learn a lot. If they don't pull the trigger, I think one of the things it tells you is that they really like Gordon Hayward. I think another is they don't trust, and I don't blame them here. I don't know how much they trust Jason Tatum to run the offense. And this is one of the key things for the Celtics is when Kemba Walker's not on the floor, they don't have a guy who can really run the offense for them. And that guy often has to be Gordon Hayward. And I wonder how much they worry about losing that. But at any rate, Jason, we have one more piece of exciting news. I'm going to let you take this one.
Well, my boy, your boy, everybody's boy, we dancing because Zion Williamson's getting closer to his NBA debut regular season, at least because he did play in the preseason. But he's getting close to 5-on-5 full contact in practice, and that means game time is right around the corner. And look, the Pelicans have played better. We talked about that controversial loss to Utah from Monday night, but he would really light a spark in his team. And you know what, Ben? They're not that far off in the West. So Zion could come in, make an immediate impact with the way Brandon Ingram's playing, with the way Lonzo's looked, with the way Drew's looked. They could end up going on a nice little run. I mean, do you think he'll have played a game by the time we record again next?
Oh, that is a good one. I think he probably will. I don't think he should. I don't know. I mean, sure, the Pelicans could snag the 8 seed. I'm sure they could. And then they could get beaten 4 or 5 games by the Lakers. I don't know. I'm not sure. I would really be extra cautious with Zion. He's your franchise player already. And looking at the way that some of their guys have played, particularly Brandon Ingram, I would be extra careful with him. Um, so for me, I think he will play before our next show, but I wouldn't recommend it. How about you? What's your prediction?
I'm going to say he is back before Martin Luther King Day. Big day for NBA basketball. It's the day that the NBA is really on the national stage.